Hi, I'm Karen. We're here at Montavilla Sewing Center, and today we're talking about the Janome HD-3000. In this video, we're going to get started sewing. So most of the time, you're going to be sewing with either straight stitch or zigzag, and maybe some of these other decorative stitches a little bit less often. So I'm going to show you how to get started sewing straight. Now, this is your indicator, this little red thing here, and you can move your knob to whichever stitch you want, and the stitch where the red indicator is going to be the stitch that you've chosen. Now, right now we're on straight stitch. So over here, we're on zigzag. So right now, we're on straight stitch. Now, it's important to have center needle position if you want to be using these guidelines here on the bobbin cover and on the needle plate. If you have this over on 6, you're still going to have a straight stitch, but now your needle is off to the left. So for straight stitch, right there on 0. And then for stitch length, that's what this one is down here. The indicator line on both of these is this little line here, vertical line. You want to have it on 2.3. That's about the right stitch length for most garment sewing. Okay, so let's get started. Get a couple pieces of fabric here. And when you start sewing, make sure you're sewing on your fabric, not off the edge here, because the thread needs to have fabric to sew in order to make a proper stitch. Okay, on the fabric, and then I've lined up the edge of my fabric with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now for the first couple of stitches, hang on to your thread tails and give it a couple stitches this way, then you can do your back stitch and you don't have to hang on to those. The reason for holding on to the threads is to keep them from potentially tangling up. Same reason that you don't want to be sewing off into the air. Okay, roll the back stitch and then stitch forward, and at this point, making sure that the edges are even, you want to watch right there at your line. Get to the end, don't sew off the end, give us a back stitch, go forward. Now we want to turn the hand wheel so that the take-up lever peeks up there like that. Then you can take your fabric out of there. There's a thread cutter on the side, and there is your stitch. Now, the reason why I'm saying turn your hand wheel so that the take-up lever comes up, when your machine rolls to a stop, it's not necessarily going to be in this up position. That take-up lever might be down there. And I'm going to show you. Let's look down here in the bobbin case. I've got 2 different colors of thread so you can see what's happening here. So right now, that's the top thread, that brown thread. It has not finished making a stitch even though the needle is up. That's because the take-up lever hasn't taken up that slack. So I'm going to move my hand wheel. Now we can see the take-up lever. Now that stitch is completed and you don't see that brown thread there anymore. So that's why when you come to a stop, if it happens to stop there, great. But if it doesn't, roll your hand wheel until it's peeking up like that. You don't want it way high because now your needle's starting to come back down. So you can gently turn it maybe 3 degrees going backwards the wrong way. But if you're hand walking stitches, I'll show you what that looks. Hand walking just means you're using your hand wheel to sew. If you're hand walking stitches, you can do that turning your hand wheel towards you. Hand walking stitches. Okay. All right. Got it like that. And then for doing the zigzag, we move the indicator right there. We need to move the stitch width over here. If we leave it on 0, you're going to just get a straight line of stitching. So this is going to determine how wide of a stitch you have. So I'm going to put it all the way over here to 6, and I'm going to just leave it there on 2.5 for now. You can also do a back stitch. Now, if I wanted to see what my stitch looked like without losing my place, I'd turn the hand wheel so that the needle's down in the fabric, lift up the presser foot, and then the presser lever is right here, and that's what it looks like. Now, I'd like to have that stitch be a little closer together and a little narrower. So in that case, roll your hand wheel so the needle's up out of the fabric especially before you change this one, because that's going to change the position of the needle. So I'm going to go down here to 3, and I'm going to make this right down here to 1, and we're going to keep sewing and see how that's different. You can see it takes longer for the fabric to move forward because it's a shorter stitch length. So that's what that looks like. I can even make those shorter and make it almost like a satin stitch. Good for applique. Okay, so what about zigzagging the edges of your fabric? You see this fabric tends to want to fray. And zigzag is a great way to overcast the fabric. Overcasting means that you're keeping your fabric from, you're keeping a nice firm edge, keeping it from fraying. I like using this foot up here. This one is the C foot. And if you look carefully, you can see, pardon me, it has a couple of little wires there. And when you zigzag across those wires, it leaves a little bit of slack there in your thread, your upper thread, so that the stitches can lay nice and flat on the edge of the fabric. If you've ever noticed, sometimes when you're zigzagging the edge of the thin fabric, it tends to kind of scrunch up the edge. Well, this will help prevent that. But you need to make sure that your zigzag width is at 5 or above, so that the needle will miss those little wires. To take off the foot, press the little button in the back, take this off of here, and there's a little parking spot right up there where I can put the A foot. By the way, each of these parking spots are labeled with the letter that's on the foot. Put this under here. I can lift this up a little higher if I need to. Put that right on there. Now, I'm going to put the thread under the foot. That's important. Also, there's a little guide on the side of the foot which makes overcasting really easy. Put this up to about 2 here. And I like taking just a couple of stitches just to make sure, be on the safe side, that that needle's not going to hit anything in the foot. It's just fine. Go ahead and start sewing. And this time I'm watching the edge of the fabric to make it just touch the edge of that guide there. That's where I'm watching. And if you want, you can do a little bit of a back stitch, but I'd only recommend about 2 stitches. That's because those little wires are connected to the foot, and it would bunch up if you did a lot of back stitches. Now at the end, roll your hand wheel so that peeks up there. Lift up your presser foot. Now you notice those last stitches are stuck on those wires, but if you pull it straight back, it comes right off. Those wires are not connected on the back, and that's what makes it flow through. See how nice this edge is. It's not scrunched up or curled up. It's nice and flat. That's what this overcasting foot is going to do for you. And then we can switch it back into regular sewing. Now there's lots of other feet that you can work with here, but for most zigzag and straight stitching, you would use either the A foot or that overcasting foot. So that gives you the overview. Now again, if we're going to do straight stitching, put this back over here, put about between 2 and 3 stitch length. If you're doing quilting, you may want to shorten your stitch length. If you're doing basting, you can have that all the way up to 4, and that's easy to take out those stitches. Here is where you would do buttonholes, and I've got a different video on how to do buttonholes. And of course, remember, if you're going to do straight stitch, make sure you've got your indicator that little red indicator right there under straight stitch. So that's getting started on the HD-3000. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If it's been helpful, give us a thumbs up. And if you have comments or questions, you can leave those in the area down below. We have lots of other videos on this machine and on other machines here on our Montavilla YouTube website or YouTube channel. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye.